Hello, hello.
Hello.
Welcome to our Sleepy Time workshop. Hi there, Stanley.
Hi,
Good to
Lily.
see you.
Good to see you too.
We'll get right into it and go into the welcome and acknowledgements of countries. So, thank you all for being here today. We would just like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land, honouring the culture, wisdom, and enduring connection to country, and we pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. We also want to celebrate the diversity in this space, including neurodiversity, gender diversity, cultural diversity, and all identities. Your experiences and perspectives are valued and welcome here. So today's presenters will be me. I am an occupational therapist at Neuronaut. So I work with children 0 to 18. At Neuronaut, we are a service for children and we are based on strong neurodiversity affirming values. And I will hand over to you, Stanley, to introduce yourself and a bit about Eden Care.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Stanley. I'm the general manager of Eden Care, but I'm also a chiropractor as well. So I have experience in both clinical and community settings. So I support people with complex physical and developmental needs. So I have experience with autism, intellectual disabilities, and mental health. And we like to focus on functional support, sensory integration, and routine building, as well as improving quality of life.
Thanks.
Alrighty. So we'll go over the objectives for today. So we'll be covering the basics of sleep, the real world challenges families face, and practical ways to improve sleep using evidence-based strategies and sensory tools. So by the end of this presentation, you'll leave with information you can use right away. So first thing we'll do is recognize common sleep challenges, learn practical tools to improve your child's sleep, understand sensory strategies to support sleep, know when and how to seek extra support, and build a toolkit of calming sensory friendly routines.
And on that note, should we get right into it and focus what you are all here for today? And that is, why is it so hard to get children to sleep sometimes? So we've done a bit of a review of the literature as well as just drawing on our collective shared knowledge around some of the main challenges that we see pop up. So the first one is those big feelings. Those big worries or fears or things that just really draw out bedtime. The other thing we'll look at is those when routines might get a bit disruptive or there's any changes. It happens in busy households. Sometimes routines slip, sometimes things happen, but that does really affect sleep. Uh, Another topical one, screen time. It's a tricky one to manage, but using tablets or TV before bed does delay sleep, and as we know, all the blue light can affect the sleep. Then another one that we see really commonly, which you may or may not know much about already, is around sensory differences. Don't worry if you don't know what that means yet. We're going to get into it a little bit later, but some children might seek or avoid certain sensations that might help them be able to feel more calm at night. So we'll go through with that a little bit more soon. In the meantime, I will hand over to Stanley's version of what he sees all day, every day in practice as a support worker.
Yes. So a lot of the stuff I see is really similar to what Lily sees in practice. But for me, last chance for connection. So the bedtime is often a child's final chance for attention. So, they go to school or the parents go to work, you have chores to do, parents are busy, they want to rest. Kids always have the funniest questions before going to bed. For example, why do cats have tails? Or where did the dinosaurs go? And you'll see they'll request for one more hug, one more story, because they're really trying to connect more with you. And sometimes life happens as well. So ideal routines, for example, bath, brush your teeth, read a book, go to bed, really goes as planned. Because after busy days, bedtime becomes hard to manage. The parents may stretch routines to make up. For example, you may feel bad that you had to work all day and you couldn't give attention to your kids. So you have one story turn to three, routine that's supposed to take 30 minutes takes an hour, hour and a half. And screen time, the dreaded screen time. So 5 more minutes can quickly turn to 40 minutes. One more game can be 5 more games. What tends to happen is screens leave kids wired and not tired, which makes them harder to settle down and harder to get them ready for bed. And if you push too hard, meltdown could happen. And if you give in, bedtime could disappear. And my personal favorite one, bedtime parkour. So some kids turn bedtime into acrobatics or a ninja show. So I have one kid that I looked after. He would set up a ninja parkour course and run around before bed. He wants to show parents and show support workers all the new tricks they can do right before bed. But really, for them, it's another chance to connect and delay the day's ending. So, in closing, kids know the rules, but bedtime really runs smoothly. In a way, it's a bit of a circus. You have stalling, you have tactics to try and make things last longer, but as well, kids just want that connection. So, kids deep down sometimes are saying, I'm not ready to let go of the day or ready to let go of you. So I'll
Stanley?
pass back on to Lily.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. We'll go on to what the current evidence is saying.
All right. Yeah. So, getting into some of the evidence, looking at peer-reviewed journal articles around what's most up to date. So, first one's around screen time. So, screen time for bed reduces the sleep length and quality for children. Now, I'll hand over to Stanley for what's the reality.
Yeah, the reality with screens is putting it away sounds simple, but it's really not. And oftentimes it's a nightly battle. So devices sometimes are used for more than just entertainment. It's a source of comfort and also a source of routine for kids. And if you take them away suddenly, it can trigger a meltdown. So the challenge really isn't knowing that screens affect sleep, it's juggling daily life while getting kids to agree to put them down.
And what's the evidence saying in relation to routines? So, with routines, parental sleep hygiene really matters. So, the habits and routines that you have as a parent um, directly correlates with children's uh, sleep habits and their overall sleep quality and length and all those sort of things. And now over to the reality again.
The reality, sometimes our schedules are as messed up as our kids' schedules. We have busy work schedules, hard to implement routines. Sometimes by the time you come home, you just want to relax. You don't want to have to think about implementing more things. And they're variable factors. You can have something happen when you come home that takes 30 minutes or an hour of your day that you didn't expect, and that throws everything out of the works. And sometimes your kids want to spend more time with you, despite knowing the routine or despite knowing you need to wind down as well. So that can change things too.
And what is the evidence saying in relation to sensory input? So, children who are either over or under responsive to sensory input are significantly more likely to have trouble falling asleep, wake more at night, and experience ongoing sleep disturbances. So, on that note, let's actually get into understanding all of these sort of sleep challenges and how it relates to sensory processing. And then we will go through some kind of strategies. So the evidence is very clear. Sensory strategies help sleep, sensory differences impact sleep. But we're going to go through a little bit around sensory processing 101. So then we can describe these things a little bit more and it makes sense when we get to the implementation. So first I'll define what we actually mean by sensory. Um, And then I'll also explain what we mean by hypo and hypersensitivity to sensory input. And then we'll go through what is a sensory strategy, then calming versus alerting sensory inputs, so we can start to work out some of those sort of sensory strategies to implement. So let's go through what actually is sensory input. We have 5 senses we know well, which we'll get into here. But as occupational therapists, we also look at a few other sensory inputs. So the 5 senses we know well, our sight, what we can hear, smell and taste. Smell, which is that olfactory, gustatory is that taste and things in and around the mouth, and then tactile. And keep in mind that a lot of sensory input, there's crossover. So, for example, when we eat, we have tactile input, and we also have gustatory input and olfactory input, because we might have the smell from the food, we have the taste of the food, but then we also experience the tactile sensation of the food in our mouth, because in and around our mouth is still part of our tactile system. So one of the other senses that we look at as occupational therapists is our vestibular system. So I'll go through a little bit about this, but this one we do want to be a little bit more careful when we are implementing sensory strategies, because it can dysregulate kids a little more easily. But basically, our vestibular system is the input that helps our brain process movement, balance, and spatial awareness. So there are 3 planes of movement. So there's angular, which is that kind of rotational or spinning motion. So right now I might spin on my chair. That's angular vestibular input. We have linear input, so that's that kind of straight line motion, backwards and forwards, bouncing on a wall. Then we have gravitational vestibular input, and that is to do with gravity in our head position. So when we tilt our head back or things like that, that's giving us gravitational vestibular input. Now onto our favorite sensory input as OTs. The reason this is our favorite is because it is the most regulating sensory input. Nearly everyone can benefit from extra proprioceptive input as regulating and calming strategies. So it refers to our body's ability to sense its position and movement and force through receptors in the muscles and joints. So thinking about proprioceptive input as that deep pressure through the muscles, joints, ligaments. So running, jumping, crashing, but we also, that's more active proprioceptive input. We can get more passive proprioceptive input, which is general deep pressure. So I don't know if everyone remembers the weighted blanket craze. That was popular because it's proprioceptive input. I think that was popular during COVID, where we all needed a little bit more of those sort of inputs to keep it all together. So those are all the kind of senses that we are talking about when we say sensory input. So with sensory input, we then look at, with each input, some people might have different tolerances for different sensory inputs. So it is very, very individualized, and it can be quite complex depending on the sensory profile. But on a basic level, we've got two sensory thresholds. So the one on the right, sensory sensitivity, you might have heard of more commonly. So those who are sensitive to sensory input might have a small cup. So when the sensory input kind of fills the cup up to halfway, where we can see the arrow pointing to, that's when we sort of function at our best. We are able to focus, we're alert, but we're not over aroused. And that's when we can sort of feel at our best and most focused. So those who are sensitive notice sensations a lot more intensely than others, and don't need too much input to reach that kind of what we call the just right level. But also in saying that, it doesn't take much for sensory overload where it all becomes a little bit too much. One that's a little bit less commonly talked about, but equally as important, is low registration, where the person has a big cup. They need lots and lots of input to get to that kind of just right level. So, as you can see in this demonstration here, it's the same sensory input for someone with low registration. And as the person with sensory sensitivity, but the person with low registration still needs more input, whereas the person with sensory sensitivity needs a lot less. Next, we'll go into behavioral responses to sensory input. So these are the ways that we actually respond to the input. So we've got two here: sensory avoiding and sensory seeking. So some people try to actively seek out more sensory input. We call it sensory seeking. So that might look like individuals who like to smell the roses, so to speak. They smell everything, touch everything. Might be with Stanley talking about the park hour pre-bedtime, that is sensory seeking, and that running and jumping and crashing and constant movement is trying to meet those proprioceptive and sometimes vestibular sensory needs. Then we have sensory avoiding. So that's where someone might really be quite unsure about new and different and ongoing sensory input. Might be like, oh, that's too loud, I'm covering my ears, or I don't want to do this, I don't want to try that food. That tends to be sensory avoiding. So, why is this important? So, it's really, really important to understand the way your child's wired with sensations, because some might be uncomfortable at bedtime because of these ways that their body's processing the sensory sensations. And before we go into sensory strategies as well, when you have an understanding and know your child's individual needs and you can identify that, that's when sensory strategies work best. So it will have overall have quite an impact on sleep and improving that sleep. So now getting into what is a sensory strategy. So it is intentional use of sensory input to regulate the body and mind. So it is tailored to each person's unique sensory profile. So as OTs, we go through different people's sensory profiles, their preferences, what they do and don't like. But with your kids at home, you can sort of try out some of the stuff we're going to talk about and sort of notice, your children well, what they do and don't like, what foods they will refuse. All those things are sensory. And then what we want to do is think about what's the sensory input that helps your child feel more calm, more sleepy, more relaxed, and what input helps them feel more alert, more awake, and those sorts of things, and go from there. So let's get into a little bit of calming versus alerting, like I was just talking about now. So I'm going to get Stanley to demo for me.
Yep.
So we basically sensory input, it's everywhere. So get creative, use these concepts and get creative with your kids. But first we're going to go through like a little bit of a practical demonstration of alerting versus calming input. So if you can, if you're sitting at the desk or if you're standing, wherever you are, maybe not if you're in public, but you can try these things out. So I'm going to get you, Stanley, while you're sitting there, to sort of rock side to side like this. So this is vestibular input. But also in saying that it's also visual input. We're getting lots of extra visual movement as we rock side to side. How did that feel for your system? Do you feel more calm or more alert, do you think, Stanley?
I would say that I feel more alert doing that.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's correct. That side to side movement tends to be more alerting. This is as on a general kind of for most people. Some people it may actually be calming, but generally that is more alerting. Now, can I get you to rock forwards and backwards on your chair, Stanley? And I think you've got quite a nice rocking sort of chair, don't you?
I've got a rocking chair, so this is definitely calming for me.
Great. Yeah. So with that kind of rocking movement, that tends to be more calming. And when we think about that as well, like if you think of, when your children were babies and they're crying, what do? We rock the baby. So that's that kind of calming input that can help regulate our systems for sleep. And knowing that does just sort of help. But also when implementing strategies, we want to think about with the movement, making sure it's very smooth and predictable. So predictable and smooth movements are a lot easier for our systems to process. If the inputs by surprise, it might actually dysregulate us more. So thinking about with your child, if you know that they are quite sensitive and things like that, making sure that they know that the input's coming and making sure that the rocking or whatever movement you're doing is very smooth and rhythmic. That kind of more jolting movement tends to be more alerting. So that's more around that kind of vestibular kind of sensory system. In terms of calming and alerting, say for tactile system, can I get you, Stanley, to very lightly touch along your arm? Like feather light touch. And please try this at home as well. And even this one you can do in public. You can very lightly touch your arm. So does that feel more calming or alerting,
For
Stanley?
me, it feels more alerting.
Yeah. So that light touch tends to be more alerting, sort of sensory input. But also with that, remembering that for people who have low registration, so the big cup that we were talking about before, this input is alerting, but it's extra input that might get to that just right level where you might feel more regulated as well. So remembering that even though it's alerting, it could appear like it's more organizing input for the child. So when we think about other touch that's more calming, can I get you to very smoothly and firmly pressing along your arm? So if you can do that, Stanley, and everyone at home. So that deep pressure and smooth rhythmic movements tends to be more calming with tactile input. All right. Now on to, so that's sort of the main part of sensory input sort of completed, but we will draw on a little bit here and there. But now getting into sleep routines. This is one I tend to struggle with myself. Sleep routine, getting into a strict routine is tricky. But here's some points that can help when thinking about formulating a routine that really does work, because if we're putting in this extra effort, we want it to be working. So first of all, making sure you have consistency. So children's body clocks work best with repeated and stable signals. So same start time, same winding down activities, and also thinking about consistency of your routine. So if they say one more story, and Stanley will get to that later, making sure you are consistent in whatever your sort of routine will be. And that kind of ties in a lot with predictability. So having predictable steps definitely lowers anxiety. Your child will know what's happening next. And as we know, if we can reduce that anxiety and heightened sort of level, that will then help with getting to sleep, staying asleep, reducing nightmares and night wakings, and also early wakings. And with that as well, getting that timing right, so appropriate timing. So bedtime that's too early or too late can also cause battles or broken sleep. So watching for those sort of tired cues and balancing with those sort of age guidelines. So Raising Children's Network, if you just Google that website, they've got lots and lots of really good resources on the like how much sleep per age, but they also have a lot of great resources on sleep in general and all the things that can help with sleep. Then after that, we want to also think about the environmental setup and transition cues. So thinking about how the room is set up, having sensory friendly kind of things around that your child likes, like a soft bedding. You might want to dim lights and slowly dim lights then slowly lead to dark, especially for kids who really don't like the dark or don't cope with transitions well. Sudden changes in environment, like going to a dark room, can be quite jarring. So thinking about gently kind of transitioning into that sleep environment in a way that's very calming and relaxed, and signaling that it's time to sort of wind down. So with that, I've sort of compiled some of the sort of main key takeaway sleep tips that you can sort of try at home. And ideally, if you are trialing this, you want to kind of give it a go for at least 2 weeks to really see the change and reassess that it is working for your family as well. So one is limiting screens 30 to 60 minutes before bed, and Stanley will go through a little bit more about the realities of that, because we do understand it is tricky. Keeping a simple and consistent routine. So, like what we talked about before, making sure that number one, it's simple, it goes into your routine as a family, and it stays the same, can help with sleep a lot. And with that routine as well, maybe having some provisions in place for yourself to keep that routine as well, maybe some reminders or a calendar or anything like that to help keep that routine going. In terms of if you have a child that does wake up a lot during the night, and you're not sure what to do, providing that sort of calm, gentle reassurance, but remembering and reminding that it's sleep time, lowering our voice. Okay, it's night time, time to go back to sleep, keeping the lights off, keeping it very quiet, and maybe providing some of that, some sort of very calming sensory or co-regulation input to help them gently back to sleep. Ideally, trying to keep them in their own bed, but if they have already crawled into your bed and then they're just not going to go back to sleep in their own bed, that's okay. And then sometimes that can be short term, but if you're noticing it's long term, then there's lots more strategies we'll go through. We won't go through today, we won't have time, but feel free to get in touch if you do need some more strategies around that. So once again, modeling those healthy sleep habits. So kids are taking notice of everything you are doing as parents. So if you as a parent don't care for your own self and sleep, and you're engaging in all these habits that you don't want your child to do, have a think about trying to get your own sleep routine and habits sort of down pat, in order to then help model those sleep habits for your child. And once again, like what we talked about before, so optimizing the environment and sensory input around your child's preferred sensory strategies. So those are the sort of main tips according to sort of the research and evidence. But I'm going to hand over to Stanley, because we do understand that the evidence base and the reality can sometimes be very different. So Stanley's going to go through what's the reality of actually implementing these tips.
Yeah, so in reality, a lot of these strategies sound simple and they sound really great, but they're hard to implement sometimes, and they're really hard to stick with, especially if it doesn't go right on the first or second go. And we all know sleep hygiene is important, but to a child, it can be boring. For example, if you just dim the room, take away the screens, there's nothing, there's no excitement, and then suddenly they're creating their own excitement and they're bouncing off the walls again because their brain's looking for its own stimulation. So when we talk about sensory strategies like brushing protocols, weighted blankets, deep pressure, or specific calming routines, sometimes they can feel really overwhelming for parents as well. And if you're tired, you've already come home from work, you don't want to have to implement 10 different changes. So I'm going to talk about some stuff that we can actually do. So when it comes to helping kids with sleep, a few small changes can really make a big difference. So like Lily mentioned, creating the right environment matters a lot. For example, you can turn on some calming music, dim the lights, make the bed feel a bit cozy and inviting, and that can help to signal to the kids that it's time to wind down. So having a clear schedule before bed also helps. For example, telling them or even printing out on a sheet. First, we brush teeth, then we have a bath, then we have a little bit of reading, and we'll chat a little bit before it's time to sleep. And then that way the kids know exactly what to do and what to expect, and it can help to reduce resistance because you can always point back to the schedule, whether it's printed or agreed upon verbally, to let the kids know, hey, it's time to do this. If screen time is a big part of your evening, try to give the screens to the kids a bit earlier. So instead of giving it to them 20 minutes or 30 minutes before going to bed, give it to them right after dinner. Or if they have to do chores, make them do the chores first and then give it to them as a reward for doing the chores. So that way, the kids aren't wired on their screens right before bedtime. And finally, if your child gets upset or frustrated, allow them space to process and to self-regulate. So a lot of times what can happen is the kid gets angry, then the parent gets angry because the kid's not listening or following, and then it becomes a disaster. Like two people that are upset can't get along and can't progress. So what you do is take time for yourself to self-regulate, but also let your kid self-regulate as well. And if you need to, you can use some of the calming strategies we showed you earlier. Rocking back and forth or the deep pressure is really good as well for yourself. So the key is to keep it simple. Pick one small strategy and build into something they're already doing. For example, we'll go on to the next slide.
Yeah, next slide.
Yep.
All right.
Putting on calming music on a sleep timer and to dim the lights 30 minutes before bed to encourage a sleep routine. It takes you about 5 minutes to find something on YouTube that will suit your kid, nice calming music, and then you can just save that and then it will take you 1 minute to put on, and dimming the lights doesn't take that long either. So something small like that can really, really make a big difference as opposed to having the lights blaring, the screens blasting, they're playing their games. You walk into their room and say, "Hey, get off your device, grab their device, turn off the lights." That doesn't work for kids most of the time. So we just need repetition, small doable tweaks that fit into real family life make the biggest difference.
Yeah, I agree.
Awesome.
All right.
Yep. So a lot of the times we hear, "I've tried everything, but it's not working." Just know that even if bedtime doesn't go perfectly, especially when you're starting to implement these strategies, every effort you make is still helping your child build healthy habits and a sense of security. And consistency matters way more than perfection. And what I hear from parents all the time is parents may feel overwhelmed and exhausted. So I'm going to hand over to Lily, and Lily's going to talk a little bit about what you can do from there.
Yeah. So, when do we get more support? So, yeah, sometimes sleep issues go beyond what we can manage on our own, especially when there's all sorts of varying factors coming into the picture, like sensory needs, anxieties, changes. And it's really important to know when to get support and start early. But in saying that too, it's very, very common that people do reach out for extra support. Sleep challenges are very common, and getting a bit of extra support might only be a tiny bit, but it just gets you on your way. And then everything else kind of falls into place once we get that sleep underway. So when there is sort of ongoing sleep issues, that's when it's a really good time to start thinking, all right, is it time to reach out for a bit of support? Another time where it might be really worth considering reaching out is when it's starting to impact on your child's health, their day-to-day functioning or development, but also family life. Is it affecting siblings' sleep? Is it affecting your sleep? And then you're no longer able to function as well. All those sorts of things normally mean that it's great to get a little bit more help. And the other one is just feeling really stuck or overwhelmed, and just needing a little bit of a fresh perspective. So yeah, so that can all help. But now let's get on to who can help. So normally, as with every other kind of health or well-being concern, first line of call is always your GP. So if you are worried about your child's sleep, it's always good to just bring it up with your GP the next time you go. And they might want to do any sort of checkups, or they also can recommend the right referrals from there depending on your needs. They can also run any kind of medical tests or send referrals for any medical tests for other medical challenges with sleep, like sleep apnea or things like that, because it's definitely important to make sure anything like that is ruled out with sleep challenges. Other places to go to are things like parenting centres and sleep clinics. Um, Psychologists can help with sleep, especially if it's around their kind of anxieties, worries, nightmares, things like that, or if your child's needing a little bit more co-regulation to get back to sleep. Occupational therapists like myself can help, and I'll get into that a little bit more, and same with support workers, which Stanley will get to explaining a little bit more. So, with occupational therapy, a common question we quite often get is, do I need a referral? So you definitely don't need a referral, but you might want to have a referral from your GP, like for if you want to access some Medicare funding or anything like that. So ways that occupational therapists can help with sleep is assessing your child's individual needs, as well as the needs within how these strategies can be implemented within the environment, like the family environment, the home, things like that. So we can support with routines and ways to implement those, and going through, like what we talked about before, building an individualized sensory profile and understanding your child's sensory needs and what can help with sleep. And then, as well as working through any of those other kind of sensory, behavioral, or environmental barriers to sleep. And we can also collaborate with your team or anyone else as well with that. And I will pass over to Stanley for how support workers can help with sleep.
Yeah, so support workers are kind of at the front line, implementing all the strategies that everyone brings in. So what we do is we reinforce the healthy sleep routines in the home. For example, we can help with consistent bedtime, doing calming activities beforehand, and also assisting with sensory and environmental adjustments. So we offer lived experience as well. So we can provide a lot of support to families who feel like they're struggling and they don't know what to do. We can give that reassurance that we're there to help and help everyone feel better that we're moving things in the right direction. We can also help to implement the strategies from people like Lily, other people like speech therapists, the whole care team. So we take everything that everyone says and we implement it into the field, and then we relay that information back to all the professionals as well. And we can act as sleep coaches by supporting relaxation routines, managing sleep disruptions gently and consistently, and also supporting caregivers to stick to plans even when they're tired. So a lot of the time when parents can come up with a really good plan, but if you've had a long day at work or you're just starting off and you don't know what to do, we can really help to implement that and make sure that we're an extra set of helping hands to help you through that. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, thanks for that, Stanley. And that sort of brings us to the end of this presentation today. But if you are sort of interested, or if there was something specific that you would have liked answered today, you're more than welcome to get in touch with either of us. So to get in touch with me at Neuronaut, the details are there in the blue. And then if you wanted to get in touch with Stanley at Eden Care, all the details there in green. So the other thing is we have a QR code here. So please, if you can, take a, do the QR code and send us some feedback. Great to have some more critical feedback too. That always helps us improve and make sure that we can make this a better sort of education series for everyone, and let us know if there's anything else you were wanting to learn about from today, or anything you would have liked discussed more in depth. And thank you, Stanley, for being my co-presenter today. It's been great
Thank
fun
you as well.
working alongside you with this.
Absolutely.
And yeah, anything else to add there, Stanley?
No, that's pretty much it. Thank you to everyone for making this happen.